Hello, New Zealand. Would you believe it? This is episode number 40 and we haven't been cancelled. Simon, that's got to be worth the celebration.
Well, we just have to work harder, Bob. We've got to. Everyone else is being deplatformed. We've got to work harder. I'm disappointed.
I can't believe that somebody hasn't complained to the ASA or the BSA or the New Zealand Media Council or somebody, even though we're not subject to any of them. We are broadcasting everywhere and anywhere. So if you're scrolling at the moment on social media, hopefully you'll come across us. We're on X, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, and we're also on YouTube. So you cannot get away from us. Lynette Bay is the first to respond. Good evening to you both. Nice to see you, Lynette. And you can comment. I will see your comments come through directly on our Facebook page, Family First Facebook page. You may be on some other Facebook pages, but Family First Facebook page or on our YouTube account. Then I'll see your comments come through and we can interact with them. But feel free to have a debate on any of the social medias. Anyway, Simon, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? 40 episodes. I think, when we first started Political Playback, we thought, oh, are we going to have enough info? Will we get to half an hour? To be honest, we've been struggling to keep it within 45 to 50 minutes. So there's never a shortage of material, is there?
No, I mean, occasionally I'll start the Thursday night, so after the show, go, okay, I'm going to start filling the list, and I'm always a little bit worried, but usually by Sunday it's already full, and then more's coming in, and it today. I mean, we've just had a poll released in the last few hours, so we're integrating things in right up to the last moment.
Okay, and one of the interesting things that I'm just monitoring is that we've been getting a lot of viewers on X, which is the old Twitter, which kind of didn't have a lot of numbers. We weren't quite sure whether to stream there, but actually it's quite interesting to see how many people are commenting there as well. So it seems people are in their own little pockets of social media and we're going to capture all of them if we can. But we will watch out for your comments coming through on Facebook's Family First Facebook and YouTube. Now, you did sort of give it away. We have got some breaking news, and that is that there is some new polling. So let me just find it. One party in particular is doing very, very well at the moment. And that is, here we go, latest Courier poll. Let me just enlarge that. And there's been a big jump in that second to bottom line, which is the light purple, which is none other than New Zealand First. They've had a big jump. Labour in the red up the top there has gone down. National holding their own. And basically, the ironic part is that New Zealand First is now the third largest party, if you believe these polls. Now, Winston never believes the polls. So what do you do in this situation, Simon? You say, oh, you never follow the polls, you never believe them, but this actually has a great result for New Zealand First. So what do? Do they say, give themselves a pat on the back, or do they just say, just another poll, doesn't mean anything?
Oh, he'll start with the positive. So, it's a great poll. This is excellent. And so very positive messaging, but he'll then caveat it at the end with, it is just a poll. We'll see what the next one is, but he'll be delighted. New Zealand First will be delighted. And look, ultimately, Bob, I think that they're clearly speaking a message which is resonating, though there is a little part of me that thinks it's quite a big jump, which always makes me a little nervous around such polling, but that's just me. But, there is a trend here, which is basically Labour and National battling it out in the low 30s. New Zealand First has been slowly progressing, and the other parties, from what I can see, are just sort of holding close to a pretty consistent number.
So the interesting thing is when you look at the centre left and the centre right, the blue is the centre right. So that's National Act, New Zealand First. Red is Labour and their lovely coalition partners of the Greens and Pāti Māori. There's been a drop. And to be honest, if I was watching the media coverage of the budget, cost of living, the health crisis that people are talking about, the some of David Seymour's bills, and we're going to talk about one of those shortly. But that's a bit of a surprise, this graph, isn't it?
In some ways it is, but I think, Labour's had not a great few weeks, and some of its comments, the things that Chris Hipkins has been saying, whether it was captured in this poll, I'd need to check, but, accusing the New Zealand Herald of basically being bought out and supporting National on, was it lowering of crime or ram raids. So they've put a few foots wrong. Nationals actually come off the back of some good law and order announcements. So I'm not completely surprised, but it's still quite volatile. As I said just a bit earlier, neither party will be happy. When you're sitting in the low 30s for these two major parties, what that tells you, it's only your core supporters who are with you. You're not picking up that, if you will, middle ground, which is needed to make sure you get a much stronger majority.
Okay, and preferred Prime Minister Luxon, I mean, that blue line up the top there, Luxon has sort of been dropping over time. Chris Hipkins holding his own. The two lines down the bottom are Winston Peters, the top purple line, so the third one down. And the other one that's had a bit of a jump, which will worry everyone, is Chloe Schwarbrick. Why does Chloe get the, I mean, why doesn't Madam, they got two co-leaders, so why is it not shared between those two? So definitely, I mean, I think the media love Chloe and they've given her so much profile that probably this is just the media party helping the Green Party. But why do you think Chloe's doing so well? Because I think, what was her figure? I think Chloe was up to, well, it's just under 6%. So it's not a huge drop. Could be the margin of error. Still a lot though.
I think the first part of it is what you just said, is she's well fated and fettered in the media, is always put forward very positively. I mean, even just look in print media, the photo is always very positive. There's never a negative image. In fact, to link it to another now former MP, Golriz Garaman, has always got this, very nice image compared to what they might use for, I don't know, Paul Goldsmith or a Chris Luxon or another government minister. The other is Marama Davison is still having her health issues. I don't think she's as forceful or as present as she wants to be. But, of course, Chloe being a diehard communist or socialist or whatever you want to call her, of course, if she gets too far ahead, she'll have to start, if you will, taxing or reducing herself, because you wouldn't want any inequalities. Surely she wants to be poor like everybody else.
Okay, so that was our breaking news, and that poll came out just an hour and a half ago. So that's how fresh we are off the press. You cannot get fresher news than here. So let's continue with what we were going to talk about. And of course, there's been this huge interest around the COVID inquiry, and Chris Hipkins said a pretty amazing statement when he was on the New Zealand Herald. What do you call it? Podcast. They do some show in the morning.
Something they're copying us with.
Exactly right. Thank you, Simon. And anyway, he made this statement, which really racked up a lot of people.
Are there things you don't want to answer?
No.
So why wouldn't you go if they ask you?
Well, look, what I don't want to see happen is, is a whole lot of theatrics. I'm very interested in engaging with them on how we can capture the lessons learned.
You're worried that this round two is politicised.
Well, the terms of reference are certainly far more political than the first one.
But they were political decisions.
Be mindful of that.
They were political decisions that were being made.
Well, yes, but governments don't generally establish a royal commission to look at political decisions made by their predecessors. So this is somewhat unusual. And the fact that the terms of reference the terms of reference specifically exclude decisions made when New Zealand First were part of the government. So I think the terms of reference have been deliberately constructed to achieve a particular outcome, particularly around providing a platform for those who have conspiracy theorists' views. That seems to have been specifically written into the terms of reference that they get maximum airtime.
Yeah, do you know why? Because telling people they have conspiracy theorist views doesn't stop them having conspiracy theorist views. And in many cases, as you discovered on the lawn of Parliament, you make them worse.
Yeah. Well, you also giving them a platform doesn't make them better.
Is it a platform?
Okay, in fairness to Ryan Bridge, he actually pushed back. He was actually giving Chris Hipkins quite a hard time, and there's another little clip that I just want to show you. These are slightly longer, Simon, because I did want to play them in context, because I am very wary that as media you can grab a little clip and put it out of context and not be fair. So that's why I'm sort of getting both ends of what he's saying so that people can see it in context. But what's your response, firstly, to the fact that he says this COVID inquiry is now politicised, and secondly, that it's just giving oxygen to conspiracists?
Oh, he's flailing about. every excuse to actually avoid fronting up, which is actually both a moral and, I would argue, political weakness. Maybe I should start there, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's Chris Hipkins, Jacinda Ardern, Ashley Bloomfield, all of these guys need to front the Royal Commission. Okay, and that's the second part. It's a Royal Commission. Okay, it sits outside of the political. The terms of reference were actually fed into, or were designed, if you will, by feedback from the public, and then curated and given to the commission. But it sits separately. These are the highest commissions and investigations in the country. Grant Illingworth KC, is running an immense manner. So Hipkins is actually undermining one of our most important processes, but he's flailing about to try and avoid responsibility, political responsibility, and I'd say moral responsibility. Because at the end of the day, Bob, if we want to learn from the mistakes and some of the things that were done right, but if we want to learn from the mistakes and the damage that COVID has inflicted, be it societal, be it economic, these guys need to front. And to put it quite cynically, he, Jacinda, Bloomfield and others were more than happy to lecture us 1 o'clock every day. But now they want to be silent. And the conspiracy stuff, that's just downright insulting. Of course, there's some conspiracy theorists, but some of his mates are die-hard left-wing Marxists. We don't shut down their debate. So again, it's just a censorious, or censorous, however we meant to say it, attempt, and he's avoiding. You can see, and kudos to Ryan Bridge, and I'll finish here, as you noted, actually gave him enough rope to hang himself. Sorry for such an aggressive analogy, but Ryan did a good job.
Okay, he actually asked a little bit more, and I just want to play this little clip to you as well, Simon, because he actually blamed the current government for not doing enough, which is kind of ironic because everybody's saying that the previous government did too much and overstepped their mark. Anyway, just have a watch of this little bit.
Can you see how this is quite annoying? If you're a country and you don't agree with what you guys did, lockdowns that went on, you even said Auckland lockdown went too long. Easy for you to say. You weren't here, stuck at home with all of your children, or you weren't the child stuck at home without their support worker, who is the lifeline to the outside world. You weren't that person. So all very well for you to sit here and say, oh, well, may go, might not go, just depends what the questions are. It's all quite political. For these people, it was deadly serious.
All of the Royal Commission, all of the Royal Commission's first report covers all of those issues, and quite comprehensively, and I've accepted the recommendations of all of them. The government haven't accepted the recommendations. That report, which sets out how we could be better prepared for a future pandemic, how we could do things differently in the future, is currently sitting on a shelf. The government haven't done anything to implement any of those recommendations.
Even watching that now, I just can't believe it. He's basically blaming the current government, who's not dealing with COVID, for the critique that was made on the previous government that did put us through the COVID response. Where's Chris Hipkins coming from? He's going to lose the room again, isn't he?
Well, he is. Just look at the body language. His face and his body language tell you all you need to know. He is deeply uncomfortable talking about this. I would say he's worried about what he, Jacinda, and the rest of them did, not at a criminal level or anything like that, but actually that this commission, and actually putting the light of day on the decisions they made and how they made them, will not reflect very well on him at all. As I say, look at his face, look at his body language. This is a man who is deeply, deeply uncomfortable. And he's also completely wrong to say that the first part of the Royal Commission covered everything. It definitely did not. In fact, the scope was exceptionally, exceptionally narrow. This new one, sure, you can make an argument it might go too wide. That's not my view. But it's actually allowing a much broader breadth of discussion, from efficacy right through to the economy. And you know what? I'm actually happy with that. The more New Zealanders who get to have their say, the better. It's probably one of the key steps, Bob, for beginning, I want to stress that word, beginning to restore the social cohesion in this country, which Hipkins, Jacinda and others wrecked.
Okay, now there was a clip that you just referred me to, which I've loaded up to play, and it's just related to comments about Voices for Freedom. Just in what context was it? Who's actually speaking? It's the leader of the previous review, eh?
Yes, and it's Blakely. Forgotten his first name. I think it's Tony Blakely, Professor Tony Blakely, talking to Lloyd Burr from Stuff.
Okay, here's what he said.
But I do want to pull back to to speak to the range of people we spoke to. And we did that respectfully. And if I may offer a personal reflection, but with my commissioner hat on, I found our engagements with Voices for Freedom incredibly illuminating. We got a lot out of it.
How so?
Well, we're not going to agree with everything they said, but there were some things they said that we found important because these were real issues for a substantial minority of the New Zealand population.
Yeah, even Lloyd Burr's surprised. How so? But actually, this is part of the dealing with groups that were labelled as conspiracists, and yet they were actually quite constructive when they were given the opportunity to speak. So that's quite interesting.
100%.
Yeah, go on, comment on that, because I have got one other clip that I want to play, but do you want to comment on just what Tony said?
Well, Tony, I thought, was great in those comments. There are many groups in society. You don't have to agree with all and everything, but the likes of Voices for Freedom, from what I've read, seen and engaged with, and, these are calm, rational people putting forward their views. And you notice the tone coming from Chris Hipkins, or even the quick tone that you got from Lloyd Burr there is classic scapegoating. They're just trying to, if you will, isolate a group of people, just dismiss them because they don't suit their narrative. And that's exceptionally dangerous in a democracy. So look, I'm glad the likes of Voices for Freedom have formed and are actually speaking into this space.
Okay, I have just got one other clip, and I was listening to this and I was just gobsmacked when I heard it. So I went back and grabbed it so I can play it to you to see if you're gobsmacked. So this is Thomas Coglin, who's a New Zealand Herald reporter. He is the correspondent for News Talk ZB, and have a listen to what he said.
Yeah, it's certainly quite combative. I mean, I think he has a point about the fact that the terms of reference beginning in 2021, which would exclude 2020, the year that New Zealand First is part of the government. I think he's got a point.
So sorry, I should have just introduced. He's talking about what Chris Hipkins was saying about the conspiracy issue.
That. The Royal Commission should take into consideration all decisions made during the COVID period. But in terms of platforming those around those people who have conspiracy theorist views, I mean, the government made incredibly intrusive decisions into the lives of a lot of people. Now, many of those people would have views about things like vaccination that a lot of people would regard as being conspiracy theories, like, vaccination is effective, it works, that is just a fact of life. People who don't believe in that, I would argue that is a conspiracy theory.
Yeah. I struggled to breathe when I heard him say that. I yelled out, I think, what? I mean, just to make a blanket statement and to say, okay, if you don't believe that they totally worked and the whole transmissibility and all the research that we're seeing coming out now, and possibly the adverse effects as well. But it seems like within the media, there's still this kind of arrogance coming through.
Yeah, well, it's just a continuation of that scapegoating dynamic. You just start labeling people. Oh, well, they're conspiracy theorists. Oh, they're this. Oh, they're that. Oh, they're conservatives. Oh, they're Christian. Anything to label and dismiss rather than actually engage. One of the best ways to deal with an actual conspiracy theorist is to engage them and debunk what they're saying. The second element is a lot of what he's probably claiming to be conspiracy theory is actually found out to be true. We are seeing, for example, higher rates of peri and myocarditis, which is particularly in young men, which is being linked to the likes of the COVID vaccine. That doesn't mean all and every theory or reflection on the vaccine in this case is right, but you engage and you debate. But one small bouquet, he is correct, well, in my view, that actually the Commission should go even wider. It is a bit of a concern. They're not dealing with 2020, but that doesn't stop or shouldn't stop Jacinda or Bloomfield or Hipkins attending. These are, again, just excuses, flailing excuses for them to avoid scrutiny.
Just one comment that Chris Hipkins made, which you may be able to shed some light on. He said that the reason that they never engaged with the protesters from day one that they turned up is because it was all these nooses and they had his name and other people's names on it. I've seen commentary from people who were at the protest who said they weren't there to be seen. Any thoughts on that? Because you were around.
Yeah,
Parliament.
I don't recall it myself. I know they held some sort of mock trial at some point. I thought that was later in the protest. I don't recall or know enough. That said, left-wing politicians years prior to that were quite happy when a guillotine was set up, I think, in Aotea Square, decapitating John Key and so forth. So look, we're used to theatrics, and that's not enough of an excuse for MPs not to engage. Acknowledging I was an MP at the time, and there were, I would say, wider dynamics, which I've talked about often here and on RCR and elsewhere, of what was going on. But I think that's a pretty weak excuse from Chris Hipkins.
Okay, Meg says, seems a little typical shoot and run from Chris Hipkins. They do the damage, then they avoid responsibility. I think that's the concern. And we're going to come back to someone else who many people want to show some responsibility in a sec. Nancy Margaret, how many supposed conspiracy theorists have been proven right on a variety of topics? Just a word to shut people up. That's true. It's a bit like Tradwife. Not that you've ever been called that, Simon. Koluki says, it seems like Voice for Freedom, NZD, SOS were also on trial with some of the Commissioner's questions. And Stephen says, vaccine limitations, natural immunity's role, limited efficacy of masks and effectiveness of lockdowns, even the original lab leak. So those are, all issues that people were talking about. All right, the other person in this whole COVID inquiry, of course, is Jacinda, and should she front up? And what I find ironic is, so look, just to give you a clue, Paddy Gower, this is what Paddy Gower was saying at the time of the COVID vaccinations, etc.
Desperate to get my vax, desperate to get my jab, which I've just got. I've got one message to everyone in Waikato, which is this. This is the jab, bro. This is the jab, all right?
Yeah, so I had to mask a little bit of that, but basically he just said, just get it effing done, fam. So he was big on everybody getting jabbed, but next minute he's saying this.
How good would it be if Jacinda Ardern fronted up to the COVID inquiry? It would be really good for New Zealand, in my opinion. The inquiry has opened again this week, and it has the ability to call Dame Jacinda to answer questions about the COVID response. In my view, the inquiry should call her and she should appear. This became obvious to me after Sir Ian Taylor really racked things up with his opinion piece criticising Ardern. Sir Ian was triggered by Ardern's book and the global publicity that has gone with it. He's frustrated because, in his opinion, it glosses over the big questions of the COVID response but goes big on glossy brand Jacinda. Sir Ian's piece blew up big time. He got a lot of hate and a lot of love. To me, the response shows the depth of feeling that remains over what happened during COVID. It also shows that many people are really frustrated that Ardern has not properly answered questions about how she managed the response. I can see how people like Sir Ian feel that she is rubbing it in by going off on a global book tour. Personally, I found Sir Ian's piece a relatively straightforward and reasoned critique. I didn't agree with all of it, but the guts of Sir Ian's piece is that Sir Ian wanted Ardern to move the focus from saving lives to saving lives and livelihoods.
Okay, once again, I just wanted to put it all in context so you can get it, so it's a fair representation of what he said. I just find it ironic, Simon, that some of the same media who were so quick to shut down any dissent and quickly to cancel anybody who didn't go with the government narrative are now the ones saying, hey, where's the accountability? Come on, front up.
While I'm pleased they are putting the pressure on, it is hypocritical. As you say, they were right there with Jacinda and Hipkins and very quick to stomp on anybody or any narrative that didn't suit. So it is hypocritical, but to the extent they can put pressure now to make change, it's a good thing. They and Sir Ian are a little bit behind. I know, and I'm blowing a bit of a trumpet for the reality check crew here. They've been talking about this for a while and campaigning for it to happen. But I think my final point is this, Bob. Jacinda, Hipkins, Bloomfield, all of these guys shouldn't need to be compelled or asked to attend the commission. They should be turning up. So Jacinda can talk about leadership and kindness all she wants, but she doesn't walk the talk because the real leader would front. And there's a moral imperative, as I touched on earlier, to turn up. If they truly believe in New Zealand and doing the right thing, of course you would front and talk about what you were thinking, what you did, so that A, we can understand how we got to where we are today, and B, as you'll anticipate, we'll know how to better act in the future. But they're showing a lack of moral courage here. They really are, by not just fronting up.
Okay, the comments are going off, but we've got to keep going on our topic, so I'll try and get to some of them later in the program. Keep them coming. Look, I really just wanted to touch on the Regulatory Standards Bill, Simon, because to be honest, it seems like because it involves red tape, it's kind of like shoom, straight over the top of many people. Eyes glaze over. It's one of those bills that only politicians want to talk about, and it's only because they have to. But there's this huge heat on it. David Seymour's involved again. It seems to be a racist bill. I was wondering if you were able to just, for most of us here who haven't got our head around it, give us a 101 understanding of what's the Regulatory Standards Bill, and is it actually as controversial as they're making out?
I don't think it is. I'm relatively supportive of the bill. Long and short, maybe I'll start there, and I'll try to keep this really brief. It's saying that any minister who's wanting to propose or pass a law in Parliament needs to be able to say how both the law and any regulations coming out of it fit with some of our broader constitutional conventions, like the rule of law, like the protection of property rights, around fair taxation. So for an example, and I've called up the legislation here so I could be accurate for once, it says that, a minister must be able to say that it's following the rule of law, such as the law is clear and accessible, that it shouldn't adversely affect people's rights and liberties, that every person is deemed equal before the law, that there should be an impartial judiciary. And there's a lot more. So it's just really taking our core democratic conventions and saying every minister needs to confirm that they are, if you will, passing regulations and laws which are called with the rule of law, with individual liberty, with property rights. And if not, then they have to say that they are not, and for what reason. And so it's a little bit similar to how we act around the current Bill of Rights in New Zealand. It's called a Section 7 review. Every minister has to put its law against the ruler of the Bill of Rights and say, it fits or it doesn't. So for example, and we've talked about it here on Political Playback, removing prisoners' voting rights. We measure that up against the Bill of Rights. The minister says, yep, we acknowledge it is stripping from the Bill of Rights. These prisoners are losing an element of their human rights, but we're okay with that. Whether viewers agree with that or not, but that's the litmus test. And that's what the Regulatory Standards Bill does. And again, I don't see it as particularly controversial, but I can see why it has become so. But I should stop talking so that you can have your chance.
Well, I heard a red flag, and it was in one of your categories, and the category was when you said equal before the law. Now, as soon as I heard you say that, I thought that is going to be a trigger point for groups that think equal before the law is somehow problematic in New Zealand. So am I right?
Oh, look, absolutely. If you are, and it reflects my centre-right views, I believe in everyone is equal before the law. But if you are the Te Pāti Māori or left-wing Marxist, that's probably a tautology there, a repetition, you won't like it at all. You actually want differences. If you're a believer in extreme Maori activism, if you are someone who believes in diversity and in the diversity politics, or identity politics, that's red rag to a bull. And so clearly this has got a bit of David Seymour in it as the sponsor around things like that. But personally, it's not forcing any view. A minister could say, no, I am, Tama Potaka, one of our Māori ministers could say, no, I am passing laws which will deliberately make the situation unequal for Māori, Pacifica and everyone else. I'm making this up. He can do that still. He just has to say that he's doing it and explain why. So I don't really see the major problem here. I think the issue ultimately, Bob, is it is more of a centre-right philosophy, and David Seymour's leading it. And so you've got this absolute pile-on, and so it's becoming a lot now about collective rights versus individual rights, certainly listening to some of the submissions. That's the big push. No, there's only collective rights. Everyone needs to give over of themselves for the greater good of the community. And you go, I've heard that before since like 1917 and the Communist Revolution.
Okay, well, a bill that wants more accountability for ministers, I think, can't be a bad thing. So therefore, I'm wondering what the issue is. But the media coverage that I've seen, and sorry, this is my final question, is the media coverage that I've seen seems to suggest that David Seymour hasn't got the words Treaty of Waitangi somewhere in the bill, and so therefore the bill is going to cause the end of the world.
Well, there's no reason to have the Treaty of Waitangi mentioned. I mean, the Treaty of Waitangi does not need to be mentioned in every piece of legislation, and I'm not particularly sure why it's needed in this one around lawmaking and regulation. It's not needed. Why the activists are making a big noise about it is that they use the Treaty of Waitangi as a vanguard or as like the head of a spear. For all of their issues, usually progressive or left-wing, they front the treaty first, and therefore it sort of helps, if you will, push the argument, amongst other reasons, because people don't like to be seen as opposing the treaty as sort of the all and everything. So that's why they're upset, and so that's why they're really flailing about. My pick, it's going to pass, because all this yelling and screaming is fine, but the government has the numbers.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on before my eyes glaze over. It really seems a storm in a teacup, to be honest. Let's go to something far more tragic, but far more urgent, and that is that we do have a cancer of child abuse in New Zealand, and Paul Goldsmith, the Minister of Justice, says protecting children from harm is a colossal challenge. Look, we've seen too many examples of, we saw the recent death of the baby in Foxton. We had baby Rue, who they still can't find, or the family has clammed up, so nobody is being held accountable yet. We had Kaikoui last month. There's just been too many child abuse deaths. In fact, I've got a rap sheet. I've started recording since the beginning of 2007 of every child abuse death, and it's just tragic to read. I guess the question I've put to us is the government, but also the media, sitting on their hands on this? It's kind of like you have these tragic deaths and they're just mentioned as kind of the third or fourth story by the media, and the politicians don't seem to be doing anything.
Yeah. Look, this is huge, and it's tragic. I think probably viewers can hear both of us sort of a sad exasperation. Let's start with the media. I think actually they've got a greater role to play. And by the way, I will get to the politicians. I can even share some of my own time and insight there. The media should be doing a much better job. We've seemed to have normalised or just accepted that young babies get killed. And let's be completely honest about this, it's disproportionately Māori and Pacifica. And until we actually, and I talked about this on a radio interview earlier this week, until New Zealand society openly and frankly talks about this, we can't address the problem. And so media play a really crucial role in this. And it's not to name and shame, but actually to accurately report what's happening. Because if we don't know what, and we're not prepared to talk about it, frankly, as I just said, you're never going to solve it. But it is just pushed to the sidelines. So there's a complicit silence. There was a lot of talk, and I think it was when I was in opposition around this, certainly in the National Party, around what's known as the right to silence. So of course, everyone wants those involved to be found. But there's quite an ancient legal right to silence. In other words, you cannot be compelled to speak. And I'm not completely unsympathetic to that. But there's a bit of a middle ground that I would love to see Paul, as in Goldsmith, look at, which is juries and judges can take inferences from that silence. So at the moment, if, like baby Rue's family, appear to be silent because of guilt, the jury and the judge, if they were to be put in front of them, cannot infer anything from that. I'd like to see the law change. So yeah, you can have your right to silence, but actually a jury can sit back and go, really? You don't want to speak at all about the death of a child in your family? How strange is that? And so there's an option. And actually, if the government was serious, there's a whole lot of other things they could put to the side to create space for this. I'm afraid dealing with shoplifters, for example, good as it is, or ram raids, important as it is, I don't think is as important as protecting our young children.
Oh, sorry, my plug. I want you to just speak a little bit longer because I just got a warning that the battery on my computer's about to die. So can you speak a little bit longer?
I can. It's funny, to our viewers, I could get a bit of a sense from here in my studio that something wasn't quite going right in Bob's end, and then I ran out of my time. But I think you get the point, is that the government should and can be looking at solutions. It does have a role to play here. It doesn't matter if it's National now, Labour in the future, but saying that it can't be on the agenda because there's other things doesn't wash for me. Protecting children is far more fundamental to me, and putting it quite simply and crudely, than having someone nick a bag of crisps out of the dairy, as bad as that is.
Okay, right, I'm back. We're plugged in, thankfully. Always a worry when you get that cord come across. Look, let me just give you what I think is the elephants in the room on this child abuse issue, because it is one that we've been tackling since 2007. Actually, we hosted a 3-minute of silence, which was nationwide in 2008. I remember standing outside Starship Hospital with Christine Rankin and Garth McVicker. Look, I think there's 3 reasons why we're never going to solve the child abuse issue in New Zealand until we deal with the elephants in the room. The first is family breakdown, declining marriage rates, and weak family formation. But the problem is that the cultural elite do not want to talk about marriage. They don't want to talk about structure of family, despite the fact that the research shows that there are certain structures which are far safer for children. So that's one. The second one is drug and alcohol abuse. That is a major risk factor for kids for risk of child abuse, but the media doesn't want to go down that track of talking about the problem of drugs and alcohol, in my view. And the third one is, unfortunately, sadly, and as I spoke at a recent conference in Wellington, right next to Parliament, unfortunately, Māori are disproportionately represented in the child abuse statistics, but that's because of the weak family formation. Very low marriage rates in Māori. They've plummeted. Also got high teen pregnancy rates. And of course, if you do talk about that, you're immediately labelled a racist. And so nobody goes near any of these elephants in the room, and so we're never going to solve the problem.
Yeah, look, absolutely right. And, a lot of what you said echoes part of what I've touched on. And, you and I talked the other day before I went on to a radio interview with Rima. Exactly that. And my fundamental point, it doesn't matter if it's around child abuse or anything else. If we're not prepared to name what's happening and actually talk about it and confront those elephants, as you put it, or those difficult conversations, we're never going to move forward. In fact, all you'll see, as you see across governments, and what I mean by that, again, doesn't matter if it's a Labour-led or a national government, they'll just put more money in, they'll just make more rules and regulations, they'll just keep reshuffling the way the ministries operate. And as we've seen, like when they changed child, youth and family to Oranga Tamariki, nothing's changed.
Rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, as they used to say. Simon, just regarding this right to silence, my argument, and look, we called on Simon, who was your colleague, Minister of Justice, Simon?
Power,
thank you. Simon, we've got the power. In fact, sorry, no, I'll come back to the comments because everyone's having a real swerve at me tonight with this plug. With Simon Power, we asked for the right to silence to be removed. Our argument was that the vulnerability of a child, if a child has been killed in a home, any adults that were present lose the right to silence, or else they're locked up until they speak. Personally, I haven't got a problem with that. Baby Roo, we still haven't found a killer for Baby Roo, and I can't remember what area that was, but that's because the family clammed up. Same with the Kahui twins, of course. My argument is if you were present when the child was killed, you lose your right to silence, and until you give evidence, you're going to be locked up. Too harsh?
It makes me a little nervous. I don't think it is too harsh. I think there's a part of me, it's probably an element of my sort of traditional side that, respects that we've had this right to silence for a long time. And if you start making exceptions, I think that's a problem, because then, it's a slippery slope argument, so it's fairly weak. I'll acknowledge that. But okay, well, what's the next the next situation in which the government will compel you or force you to speak. So the right to silence is fairly important. I think, I'm biased because it was a suggestion I just touched on earlier, that juries and judges can take inferences from that silence. So you don't have to lock the parents up. But whether it's the Kahui twin situation or Baby Roo or others, the police will have an array of evidence and add to that a family that's gone silent. I think a lot of jurors would go, okay, something's not right here. And this just adds to the picture. I think that could be a way around. But to be honest with you, Bob, I'd want to defer to those judges and KCs and others who I know over the years have argued and debated backwards and forwards on this.
Okay, right, slightly lighter. Woke 6 laughing at the way Bob was moving his bottom and him saying plug. Foo says clean up in aisle 1. Sunnyside says nice to see Bob is well prepared. Reform Sheep says Bob should fire Bob for that, lol. Anyway, some more serious comments. Thank you for speaking up for me. Troy says, well said, Bob. Let's not forget the effect of abortion, making babies' children worthless. Exactly. If you have an attitude that you can kill children in the womb, then why not outside of the womb? I agree. It's a culture of death. 3-inch Hippopotamus says, great to see a live stream chat in New Zealand. Well, welcome aboard. I'm glad you've run into us scrolling through your social media. And Nigel says, spot on, the PC Woke Brigade don't want to face the elephants in the room, as both you and I have been saying, Simon. All right, we need to keep going because I can't believe how the time is rushing and we're going to run out. A News Hub presenter wants to be, well, used to be with News Hub, not with Māori TV now, wants to be a politician. Simon, is there a problem with someone in the media becoming a politician? Does that suggest a very cosy relationship and we should be concerned about that?
I think in this particular case, we should be. I think, importantly, anyone's allowed to run for Parliament. So it's perfectly right, moral, legal, politically, whatever you want to say, that she wants to run for Parliament. So there should be no impediments. But something I mentioned the other day on Solid Ground is, she's running for the likes of Te Pāti Māori, which is an exceptionally activist party. And it doesn't mean that, she shouldn't, but it does call into question an ability to have been a reporter and a presenter on a mainstream media channel. Of course, we can think of Maggie Barry, we can think of Willie Jackson, we can think of Pam Corker. We've had many out of media. In fact, I've often argued we need a diversity of people in Parliament. I'm quite comfortable with that, a broad representation. So I don't want any viewer to take the view that, ex-journalists and reporters should not be allowed. But in her particular case, it does put into question just how objective she could have been. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure Maggie Barry and Pam Corkery had their biases, but when you're running for the likes of Te Pāti Māori, who are radical in the extreme, I don't see how you can reconcile that extreme politics with any objectivity in the media work.
Okay, I would add Chris Farfoy, who introduced the conversion therapy bill. So to me, he's radical. He's gone now. Ingrid Leary, currently with Labour. She was in the media, wasn't she?
That's right. She was, and she was also with the British Council for a while. I think, again, there's a number of them. So it's, again, not saying they shouldn't be allowed. But she's not a complete exception, but it just calls into question. I suppose the more radical someone is on the left or right of politics, and then is in media or moving from media into that space, you go, whoa, I mean, how could you pretend to be objective or even be objective?
All right, let's keep going. New Zealand First have got a bill. I mean, they're very popular at the moment. They're going up in the ratings. They now want to make sure that we always have cash. Simon, to be honest, I can't remember the last time I used or held cash. I just don't use it. It's just not convenient. I just love being able to zip zap. I haven't got a problem with that. But I know for my mum and dad, cash was king. I mean, I still remember Dad not too long ago, about 5 years ago, he would be down to the bank for his weekly stock up of cash. He was always carrying cash. This is probably, what's the word you used when a party sort of just brings up something that, dog whistle? That's kind of a negative, isn't it, though? Is this a dog whistle to the older audience, or is he trying to prevent the whole digital aspect that people are concerned about?
Not sure. Well, I suppose there is a slight dog whistle in this, or even a virtue signal, but he's really just appealing to a demographic, particularly older ones, but others. And look, I would put myself in this space. I'd still like to see a cash option for two reasons. One is the elderly. I think of my mother and father. I mean, trying now with my mother, unfortunately, has a cognitive decline. Trying to explain to her how to use an ATM card, let alone PayWave,
exactly.
The other is, and Thomas Coglin and others might call me a conspiracy theorist, but as someone who, like you, I'm using PayWave all the time, but I can imagine situations where a government says, actually, we not only know exactly what you're doing and want to know exactly what you're doing, but also will control your usage. And the extreme example to illustrate it is Communist China, with their social approach, what they very euphemistically called social, that long and short, because they can control everywhere you go, your credit card doesn't work, your bus pass doesn't work, and I'm just a little nervous around that. And again, New Zealand's nowhere near communist China, but even when we talked about COVID earlier, imagine a world where the government says, yeah, that credit card of yours ain't going to work, Simon, any more than 2 kilometres from your home. If you don't have cash, and I'm not here trying to argue one should be breaking the rules, but it's a quick, very quick and crude example of what happens when everything is digitized. It's controlled and managed by everyone other than you.
Nigel says, hang on, it's not that one.
You're just trying to keep reaffirming yourself with Nigel's comments. I mean, I agree with Nigel, but...
There we are. Nigel, Winston Peters is right. I was in Z as a shop today, the petrol shop today, and the system went down. But because I had cash, I could make my purchase. I tell you what, if you don't have cash, you get the thing free. But anyway, and what else? Somebody said, Murray says, best move ever from New Zealand First is 58 old. Well, to Simon, it's old, Murray. And Foo Dogs Trucking, which is always an interesting name, says, just take a look at debanking. So
actually, Foo Dogs Trucking is, I love the name. He's right on the money, or she. Yeah. I better not presume.
No, that's right. Gosh, that was right. Terrible, Simon.
Oh, I know. But it's quite true. I mean, this debanking is another way that actually you are being forced to conform. And, the BNZ was wanting to, debank coal mining companies. I mean, they're doing nothing illegal. You might disagree with mining, but actually a bank says, no, we're not going to allow you to deal with us. If you, not as a company, but as an individual, can't access cash, you're stuffed.
Well, Kiwi says, go, Simon. Bob needs to wake up. Exactly right. Nancy Margaret says, you are right, Simon. And a lot of people, Lynette says, this is to stop these radical shops who don't accept cash. I just walk out and I never go back. And funny, Lynette, when they didn't take credit cards, I used to walk out of those shops because I wanted to use the credit card, especially if I was doing business expenses, etc. So, and Gardner Gone Wild says, keep using cash or we will lose it. So there we are, quite a bit of interest on that. Right, we've got time for one more. So let's just talk about the media, our favourite topic, Simon.
Bring yourself back on screen, Bob. There you go.
TVNZ says that they're launching an independent review to check its news for balance and bias. Now, to me, Simon, that's kind of like a tacit admission that they have got a problem with it, isn't it? I mean, are they sort of shooting themselves in the foot by even doing this review? Shouldn't they be arguing, we're not biased, we work hard not to be biased, why do we need a review?
Because the Minister of Broadcasting, that's what he's titled now, it's actually Paul Goldsmith as well. He's not just the Minister of Justice, he's the Minister in charge of, let's say, broadcasting, I think that's what they call it, has asked them to do it. Basically, in his letter of expectations has said, and I don't have it verbatim here, but basically trust in you guys is plummeting. One part of it is that you are or are perceived to be biased. Sort it. And so whether it's the board or the executive has said, right, we need to do this to try and work it out, or if they are or are not, and then to respond. But my suspicion, cynical as I am, Bob, is that they'll just find that, there's a few little issues on the periphery, but by and large, they are amazing and trusted and right down the middle. Probably a waste of time.
I'm just laughing because Simply Green has said TVNZ investigated TVNZ and found TVNZ did nothing wrong, which may be very true. Look, the evidence suggests, and the latest trust survey showed that the trust in media in general has tanked from 53 to 32 over the last 6 years. I was just interested to look at TVNZ's. And I heard the boss of TVNZ, so this lady here, who's the boss of TVNZ, I don't know her name, but she was saying that, look, our trust has improved. If you look at the yellow bit that out the far right, in the last 12 months, yes, it improved 16.7 points, but TVNZ's trust started at 6.8 back in 2020, and it's gone down to 5.6. So that's a big drop. A minus 17.6. So I think you look at the overall trend. She's saying in the last 12 months, it's gone up. It has 16.7, but over the last 5 years, it has dropped 17.6. So there's no doubt about it. They do have a problem with trust, but then again, it is, as I said, media wide. So, this is a question that I always ask Peter Williams when I'm talking to him. Can they get past their ideological viewpoint to a point where they can build their trust by being more balanced? I don't think they can. I think that's too far down the track.
I think so. It could over time. If I took my cynical hat off for a moment, depending on who they appoint to this independent panel, it might give you some confidence. They can drop you and I or Peter Williams a call anytime. We're available. But the other is, will they choose to implement it? And I think the ideological rot is quite deep, particularly around the likes of identity politics, gender politics, the left-wing bias and so forth. That's very hard to pull out. In many ways, you don't need an independent review. You need a board and executive leadership who are prepared to actually return journalism, in this case TVNZ, back to its core and objective functions.
Okay, we've got 1 minute. Forum on the Family, end of August, 28th and 29th. Register at forumonthefamily.nz. Which speaker are you looking forward to, Simon?
I'm actually probably listening to Israel and Maria Folau. I just think hearing them in their own voice will be not only insightful, but I suspect quite moving.
Yeah, and that will be a pre-recorded personal interview that I'll be doing with them because on the day of the forum, unfortunately, Israel is in Japan with rugby commitments. I'm looking forward to Dr. Miriam Grossman as well because she was in the Daily Wire video, What is a Woman? She was the one voice of sanity amongst all the radicals that they interviewed for that documentary. Just one other thing to advertise, that as part of familyfirst.nz, we're developing watching, which you're doing right now, but also reading. Simon is writing some articles. I've been writing some articles. And also you can listen to these broadcasts on Spotify as well. So all the options are there. And the very best bit, as Simon kept reminding me down the bottom there, is that there's no paywall on Family First because we have just got the best supporters who enable us to not have to put up a paywall. And that's got to be a big plus, eh, Simon?
Oh, I think so. Look, I'm incredibly grateful, as I know you are, to supporters all around the country who are incredibly generous and continue to be so, because it's what actually enables us to do the advocacy research that we want, but also to be able to present it back, as you say, through watch, read and listen. So head over to the website, familyfirst.nz, check it all out.
Okay, well done. Episode number 40, done and dusted. We're slowly getting better, and we will be back next Thursday night at 5 o'clock for more Political Playback. Thanks for watching. Until then, have a great night.